Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. This is going to be our very first episode with a guest, and we're so excited to have Chrissy Newton with us. I am your co host, Chris Devine, aka Awake While Sleeping, and this is my co host, Ariel Elizabeth.
Hey guys, we're so excited about this today.
So we're so excited to have Chrissy with us, and I wanted to give you a little bit of a background, and I'm going to obviously let her talk more about herself. But Chrissy comes to us with a wealth of knowledge in science, in journalism, in PR, marketing, communications. She has an amazing bio. She owns her own communications firm. And as most of you probably know, she's also very active in the UFO community. So before we dive in, I would let Chrissy just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. It's good to see you ladies too, and thank you for having me. I've worked in public relations for over 15 years, working in entertainment, lifestyle, consumer brands, business. The one thing I haven't fully done is worked for the government yet. Maybe one day in public affairs, and hopefully in the UAP topic. That would be a dream.
That would be
But
awesome.
right now, I just been working in public relations, and I'm also a partner and co-founder, or partner and co-partner, I should say, not founder. The guys founded it, but I'm a partner at the Debrief, which is a science and media and technology news outlet. If people aren't familiar with it, so I do the public relations there. I also podcast, and I've been doing some journalistic stuff as well too. So just dabbling all in the arts, media, communications field for the past 15 years.
Wow. What fascinates me about that is I tend to like to dabble in a lot of different things, and I get a lot of feedback. People are always trying to kind of settle me down and stick me in a niche into one little corner. What has it been like managing all those different things? And you do such a great job at it. I'd love to hear more about how you do that.
Well, it does take a team and really good people around you. So with the Debrief, there's 6 of us in total, and then 5 of us that contribute. We have one other tech person behind the scenes, Steve McDaniel. But for that, it's a team, right? And
Yeah.
there's a lot of give and take. There's a lot of, disagreements and having to try to communicate. That's challenges on its own, is working with people. We always say doing the job is not as hard. Sometimes it's making sure that everybody's, well taken care of. So that's a big part of the Debrief for us. So that's a whole family and a whole group of people that work, just to provide news and independent journalistic news that's credible and also factual. So that's one part. Public relations, for sure, for the fact that past 15 years, it's been a team of people that I've worked with, luckily, men and women. A lot of women are in the communications field. So I've worked with tons of different ladies from all different parts of the beginning of their career, and have watched them grown. Some have interned with me, and now some are like the head of Nike in Canada, which is like really wonderful to see.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
so
it's,
cool.
So cool.
it is cool, and it's like, or surprise where I run into them, and you're like, "Hey, what have you been doing?" You see them winning awards, so that stuff makes me really happy because I've been able to contribute to teaching them about public relations or helping them grow in their own space, and then them even maybe sometimes being better, practitioners than myself. So yeah, it's challenging, juggling all that stuff, but as I reach and out myself in my own age, as I reach 40 in January, I
Oh my goodness,
learn.
no.
Yeah, and I'm like, life. Yeah, thanks. Life work balance is the most important for me. So sometimes it's picking and choosing what you want to do now. I've accomplished a lot of great things, and I'm really happy about that, and I will hopefully accomplish more things that I've always wanted to do, but that's kind of my next focus on life, is growing myself in a journalistic space, but also expanding my world in PR, but growing my podcasting and, yeah, my understanding and love for journalism. So I think I'm lucky to be able to do that, but it's focusing your attention on things that you love. And, when you put your attention to something, hopefully that's how it grows and it fosters into something really beautiful. So that's the goal. Yeah.
That's
That I
awesome.
was going to say that it's amazing that you already have that focus on the work-life balance, because I feel like a lot of people kind of come to that realization when it's too late. They're in their 60s or 70s and they look back and they go, I wish I would have spent more time with friends or more time on vacations and traveling. And so
Mhm.
it's good to hear you speak about that, because, you don't want people to realize that after it's been too late.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm trying to, I don't have kids and, and one day maybe I'll still get to be able to do that. Like my whole life is focused on my career and my
Mhm.
family as well. Right. So, and my friends and community, but a lot on my career. So now it's like to shift gears and to do all those other things that I've been wanting to do
Mhm.
before, maybe before time's up.
Yeah.
Hopefully I
Yes.
have way more time. You never
You
Yes.
have
know, right?
time.
Do
You
things
have
that make
time,
you
trust
happy.
me.
Right. I'm
Yes.
hoping, it's like to do things that make you happy. So, and then surround yourself with those people that contribute to that. So it's a lot of like, God, it's been, let's try to have self-awareness as much as possible. And sometimes that's hard. It's just,
So important.
yeah, I think so. Yeah. Try to
Yeah.
be.
I've got a decade on you. Don't worry. We have a lot of
I
great
would
years
never have thought
ahead.
that when I met you, Chris. I would not see that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Thank you.
know
And
Chris is
oh,
so youthful. She has so much youthful energy.
oh, thank you. I don't feel that, but I have a great story though, a little anecdote of when we met. So I we met after one of Randall's screenings in LA. We had kind of a little after party at our hotel, and Chrissy and Randall and my husband and my best friend were there, a couple other people, and it was just this really nice, great evening. Chrissy was number one. You hear her speak at the event, and she's so eloquent, and the facilitation of the event was just like superb. And then you come and you hang out with her, and she's got the best sense of humor. Sorry, Chrissy, if I'm embarrassing you.
No, it's okay.
But anyways, it was a wonderful evening. And so me and my best friend the next day were like, oh my gosh, we just love Chrissy. We have a
Oh,
girl crush, we're just, and then my husband comes up and he's like, oh, I have a girl crush too.
so sweet. You guys
We
are
just
so
laugh and
cute.
we're like, honey, that's just called a crush. Okay. That's just called a crush.
You guys are so cute. Well, you guys gave the space too. That's like a part of that too. Like I don't always show my funny side. Like I do, but I only show it on the podcast so much. And I
Yeah,
probably should more, to be
you
honest.
should. Yeah.
Sometimes it's just so serious and things. I'm like, relax, Newton. Like, not
Yeah.
everything's serious. But it's true. But you guys gave that space for like it to be like
Oh,
that. So that's why you were so welcoming and so lovely and like, and
oh,
also like so supportive because it's a challenging subject, right? Also with
it
like
really is.
talking to people about having experiences or experiencers too, like giving space for that is unbelievable. So I think that's why you can be
Oh,
yourself. And that's like, I think it's most
oh.
important. It's
Well,
this is
thank
not an
you.
easy subject. It's challenging.
It's not,
Yeah.
it's not, and that's one of the things that, um, I appreciated about the evening, which if we can jump on into a little bit about your story about how you got into UFOs. I think you and Ariel actually kind of have a similar story. So I'd love to hear your story, and then we can kinda tag on to that and see how it's similar.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. My dad was massively into UFOs. I've said this in a couple other podcasts for sure. He had an experience when he was 18 and it was in northern Ontario, and he was driving with a group of friends and they ended up seeing a UFO in the distance. So they pulled over and they got out of the cars and they were watching this thing. And I forgot about this until my dad reminded me. I've said this before, but it's funny how I'll talk to him because this is his story I'm regurgitating. So sometimes I go back to like clarify things.
Good,
And
yeah.
he said to me, he was like, yeah. And I said, well, the first thing they did was they like flashed their high beams at it. My dad did with his car, and the UFO flashed back at them. So yeah, it was
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
unbelievable. And yeah, and
I
there was
believe it.
five of them in this vehicle. It was a full car, and they still talk to this day. I believe, unfortunately, some have passed, but there are people that are still around that my dad has called them and kind of revisited the experience. And they're all, they're like, yeah, that happened, but they're all, public becoming public is one thing they don't want because the
Right.
ridicule still in their mind is still a very hard thing to deal with. But
Of
they still
course.
agree that what happened to them happened. So outside of that, then I guess his friends were hunting and they had a rifle in the back, in Northern Ontario,
Yeah.
common back then, and had a scope on the rifle to get a better look at the UFO. So they pointed the rifle at it, not to shoot at it, but to look
Right.
at it to get a closer
Right.
look. And the thing took off down the highway. And so, they watched it communicate, they
Wow.
watched it move, and it was close to them too. Like, and then my dad took a photo of it, and he has the picture, yeah, and he showed me that photo as a little
No
girl. He
way.
has it, we still has it, and we have it locked away somewhere. And I've said to him, you need to give it to me, and it's in like a little film. so I can print it. And I was going to blow up as an art piece and put it in my kitchen. So
That would be amazing.
Ooh, I
Yes.
love that.
right. I was
Yes.
like, Dad, I was like, so
Of course.
he just laughs at me. I'm like, no, because I have a UFO in a picture in my kitchen. It's unfortunately a Billy Myers photo, but I still love it. It's one of my favorite images, even if it might be fake or not. But
Yeah.
that's the beauty of ufology, I guess.
Yes.
So outside of that, yeah, and that's my dad showed me that picture as a little girl, and it just lit up everything inside of me. It's something that I connected with him, and we had this mutual bond together. He taught me so much about UFOs, and I just intrinsically loved it, and just always gravitated towards it. And that's how it all started. And then we started going to conferences together, and
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, and it was just my dad. I laughed. I walked into a conference once and I was like, these are our people, he laughed. But you felt so, with certain people, you just feel that you have a place to learn and to communicate, and be able to, at that point, it's going way more mainstream now, but that at that point, as a counterculture, have a
Oh,
touch point to
yeah.
have these discussions. Yeah. So that's really how it started for me. And then it just grew into a place where my career could leverage to help expand the education of UFOs to other people, and what it means, and to hopefully break down social norms, and propel the counterculture into mainstream. So as much as, and there's lots of us
So
doing it,
amazing.
and that's the
So
beauty of it right
amazing.
now. So I can't wait to look back at this when I'm like 80, if I'm still around, to be honest. Yeah.
Oh, I can't even
Gorgeous.
imagine how different it's going to look.
Oh yeah.
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 That's amazing. My grandfather had a very similar experience of driving down the road with his friends, and they saw the UFO. They piled out of the car and they watched it hover at about the height of a telephone pole. And then it just zipped down, just zipped out of sight, no sonic boom, no anything. And they all just were kind of left standing there like, what just happened? Did you see that? And it was like the classic metallic disc. And yeah, and he told me about that. And kind of like
Wow.
you, just a very intrinsic curiosity of just exploring the mystery of it, of just being, I was just always very drawn to the mystery of it, you know?
Yeah, where was that? Because my dad's was the same height of a telephone pole too. You can see, well, it's a light pole. You can see the UAP. So first of all, you can see the car lights in the picture.
Mhm.
You can see the back end car lights in the red. So you can see the perspective, and then you can see the UFO. And by that point in film, it's just like light, right? But it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
like beams of light. But it's
Mhm.
above, like the size of a
Pole.
telephone pole too, and it wasn't big, and it
That's
was metallic as
crazy.
well. I know, it was exact same thing. Yeah,
That's
when
right.
did he, do
So
you know when he saw
crazy.
that and where he saw it? Because like that, again, we're like cross correlating data right now.
I
It's
know, I know. Well,
yeah,
this was in the middle of Nebraska, so not
wow.
anywhere near Ontario, but hey, time and space doesn't mean anything to UFOs, so
Exactly, 100%. It's wild. It's so wild to think. Yeah, well, yeah, because 'cause I've never heard it's the first time I've heard anybody. I'm gonna tell my dad that, 'cause I'll say, "Dad," I'm like, I'm like, "Ariel, I know." I'm like, "From the UFO Twitter world and podcasting now." I think he'll love to hear that, because for us, that's it. From what I know, that's the only incident that he's had. A lot of people have had the same shapes and the sizes and stuff, but when it comes to, like, distance and proximity and in years, that's not, it's common. So who knows? That thing could have been zipping around everywhere in North America.
right? Ugh, that's crazy. No, oh my gosh, I can't even, yeah, that would have been nuts. I'll have to ask him if he remembers exactly when that was.
Yeah. No, I
Oh,
like to
how
know that.
funny.
Just send me a note on Twitter or email me, because I'll
For
try.
sure.
And I don't know I know my dad probably, well, he might be able to find out the date. He for sure would know. He knows the year and the
Approximately.
month.
Well,
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I
in
bet you we
those
can do it.
days, a lot of times they'd print the dates of pictures, so the
Yeah.
photo might
Well,
have a
you
reference
know
date.
what? You're right, and I've tried to find the news clippings. So what happened was my dad saw the UAP, and then the next day and then the week after, UFO sightings were seen in that region. So I've tried to find them. So I would be able to go back into an archive and see, and then we could
Mhm.
look to see if we imagine it was the same date or even close in that a couple days or a day. It would be
That would be
unbelievable. Yeah.
crazy.
That would be
It
nuts.
it's so
Yeah.
interesting because one of our upcoming guests, is a professor of mine, and he actually has a similar story to he himself saw as a child a UFO, him and his friends. Yeah, very similar story above the so we'll hear more of that when
Wow.
he comes on, but just really fascinating, the synchronicity of some of these stories.
Yeah,
And
it's
how many
wild.
stories there likely are that people just don't come forward with, or they rationalize it away thinking, "Oh, that was just my imagination," and, just rationalizing it away, and then nobody ever hears about it. I mean, how many stories do you think are out there that we never hear about? And that breaks my heart.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too. I'm like, there are so many stories and good and not so good that people
right.
just don't want to talk about because they're scared. It's true.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
we are
the
getting a place where at
stigmatization.
least you can like submit anonymously.
Yeah.
NASA will building it. There's other, not-for-profits out there now that have that, but there will be a space where it's like, oh, I think I saw something. I'm just going to go send it here and report it and, be able to have them have the data to look at, but it doesn't mean that you have to be known still. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
we're seeing it. But we're seeing that with like there's so many reports now, even with the UAP report that came out yesterday.
I
It's
was
like
going to ask you
there's
about
still a
that.
whole
I haven't read it
yeah.
yet. What do you think about it so far?
Well, Sean Kirkpatrick has a really great, again, people love and hate him, but I will say,
Mhm.
I don't think what he's doing is wrong. The challenge right now is that the transparency part for some conversations around experiencers and other things and whistleblowers is people are feeling that he's not as transparent. But I will say he's been more transparent with the data than anybody else has been in the UAT
Exactly.
task force or, even from Lou.
Right.
He's been way more transparent. He's like, here's charts and graphs and all of that wonderful stuff
Data.
that we never
Data. I
got
love it.
before. Right. Here's the data. Right. So that's
Hmm.
wonderful. So what we see in the report is that we have about, I think it's like 295, don't quote me, I forget the amount, but of new sightings from a span of time this past year. And they're not, from what we know is that they're not foreign adversaries from what they're saying. They have no information or anything related to that. They're also saying the
Mhm.
shapes are still the same, that there's still, spheres and orbs that they're seeing. So those are consistent from the last report. But they're also saying that, they still have to, they're not saying anything about ET that we know of, but it's
Mhm.
all very similar data, but they
Mhm.
need to have, they're saying we don't have enough data. And that's the other thing. And that's true. They don't have enough.
Right. How do
They need to
you
be able to, right. They need to be able to look
how do
at
you
that. So
collect it?
people would say it's a nothing burger, but at least we're getting them. And that's why
Yeah.
legislation's there to push for more transparency. So those reports will be hopefully a little bit more elaborate, but I would say it's worth reading. I'll plug the debrief. Go to Micah Hanks's article on the debrief.org and people can see that beautiful rundown of everything that he
Oh,
reported
awesome.
on. And I think he's reported more in depth than anyone else has. So if people are really curious, Micah Hanks knows data like the back of his hand.
Mhm.
That's his
I love
forte.
it.
So that's the best place to go and read it if you really want to know those data points. Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And I do go to you guys to get my news and
I do too.
updates. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we appreciate that about you guys. What was it like, speaking of the debrief, what was it like being a part of the whole Grush story and that energy and that
Yeah.
time? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was at Contact in the Desert. I was doing some PR for them, but I was also speaking. So when that was going on, I knew that story was going to break the next day. I left that day and then the story broke and everyone's like, thanks for telling us, Chrissy. And I'm like, well, I'm not allowed to say
Well, I can't
anything.
tell
It's not
anything.
my place to, right? And well, it's not my story. It was Leslie Kane and
Yeah.
Ralph Blumenthal's. So
Right.
the challenge with that, I think, is understanding that we're doing the best we can reporting those stories and reporting the facts that we have and being able to fact check that as best as we can. We can fact check just as well as Washington Post. We have those abilities, which is like wonderful. Tim
Amazing.
McMillan is
Yeah.
brilliant when it comes to that. Other relationships that we have, obviously Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal fact checked all of their stuff. They wouldn't have come to us, but we
Mhm.
rechecked it. So then there's this other part. So there's that. And then you also have all these intelligence officials that are on background having these conversations, with reporters and with us, and then people that are coming forward like David Grush, right? So there's that part that's really exciting and you want to get that information into the ethos because you want people to start asking questions. And then I, for sure, and I only speak for myself, I won't speak with everyone from the debrief, but for myself, I do have a little bit of a worry that, parts of those conversations might be disinformation. And I've said this, and I know people
Mm.
sometimes hate that because they're like, oh, all you care is that you think it's just information. It's not true. And it's like, well, that's not the truth. I'm concerned that there's multiple things that he said that wasn't even in our reporting, right? That it was in other reporting with News Nation. So
Right.
my concern is that it doesn't mean David Grush is lying. It means that he might be privy to intelligent officials that have given him misinformation or become disinformation, because that's what they
Yep.
do in the government, to
Yep.
cover up any type of program, not even UFOs. Sometimes they do disinformation campaigns
Mhm.
internally within the American government, within
Mhm.
their own agencies, to cover something up, but then it gets leaked out to the public and it becomes disinformation, right? When it was just
Right.
meant to stay internally. And that does happen. So, to me, it's practical to think that potentially some of the stuff he's saying has been somebody that has given him false information, right? Because not
Right.
every single thing is probably accurate. It really needs to be analyzed. And that's the point, again, back to legislation, of why they're doing that, to get to the root of his claims. So there's that side of it. The other part too is worrying about Debbie down the street. I always say, this ontological shock, the word is such a
Mhm.
buzzword we use now. It's a great
Mhm.
word.
Mhm.
But the culture shock really of it
Yeah.
all is important. And I'm a little concerned as a journalist and cares about, people in that regard, and human interest side of me and the story of that, is worried that that person's going to read something and they're not going to be able to handle or cope with it. Is that really the debrief's problem? I guess it depends on who you ask in the debrief. So, and I
Mm.
guess it, in a journalistic thing, we are just reporting the news, right? That's it. And
Right.
we would report if everything was fake or a lie and wasn't true. We would report that too. We don't have an angle or a bias, but
Mhm.
that concerns me
Yeah.
personally inside. And that was a big concern
Right.
for me throughout the first 3 weeks. And I still even had my own anthological shock. Like, and I've been in UFO since I was a little girl.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my
Right.
God. Like I was like, I can't believe Debbie's probably losing her mind. Like,
Mhm.
if she's like really reading this stuff and seeing it everywhere and like following the white rabbit, she's probably like, what, she's freaking out and like going down these rabbit holes and learning and starting her journey. So, or his journey, or
Right.
or their journey, like whoever it may be. So
Yeah.
that to me is like a big part of it, because if I'm doing that, a lot of other people are having a probably a challenging time too. So that's it. But now I've come out the other end now, but we all go through shifts. I think everybody's had them. And I imagine you ladies have as well too.
Yeah, I am very interested in the societal, cultural, religious implications. As we see disclosure as a process. So as this process continues, as we're kind of, the drip method, as some people like to call it, and that ontological shock, I find very fascinating. But I get a lot of pushback when I post about it. People are like, "No, everyone's gonna be fine. People will accept it. Like people are more primed and more hardy than you think they are." And I don't know. I feel like the human psyche can be pretty delicate at times. And so I worry about that. But when I express that worry, I get a lot of pushback from people who think it's just going to be fine. It's going to be water under the bridge, and we'll just adapt. And yes, humans are very adaptable. I will give you that. We have adapted over hundreds of years to many different situations and, experiences. But this is a big one. We can't compare anything to that, because this is just universe altering. So I don't
Right.
know. What do you guys think about that, of the people who pushed back saying, "Oh, it's all just going to be fine"?
I don't know if it's gonna all be fine. I hope
I
it
don't
is.
either.
I'm optimistic it is. I just,
Yeah.
I think I'm optimistic for the fact, again, that we will get to a point where we will learn more about history potentially, or what has
Mhm.
gone on maybe since 2017, if we don't get all the way to Roswell.
Right.
But at least we might have a better understanding that we're like, wow, maybe the government doesn't really know what we think they know,
Yeah.
or they do know. I just overall, I think I don't know if it's going to be okay, but I can be optimistic. And we've
Mhm.
always persevered throughout, humans have throughout all of this. So I don't think that's going to change. We're just probably going to know more than we've ever known. And I
Mhm.
don't think we're ever going to figure it out, because I personally don't think we have it figured out. I don't, as much
No.
as David Grush has his claims, I still don't think that we really know what's going on. at all. And I don't think the American government does. They probably have a better idea than us, but I just don't think that they know it all and they're hiding everything. I think that they're trying to figure it out as they
Yeah.
go along. Yeah.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. And I think that's the part that is going to be the most unsettling it to people, is that nobody really has a grasp of what's going on. And I think that the human psyche can be delicate, and it is. And I know for me, in my process, it took a couple of years of really deep, reflection and going through all those things. And you come out on the other side okay, I think. But imagine a large population of people going through some of that at the same time. I think that's a different story, because I had a strong support system, around me during my episodes. What happens when everybody's kind of going through that at once? That's what I worry about.
Yeah, I don't think we're at the counterculture shift yet. I think we're at the beginning of this counterculture that's a movement, because that's what countercultures are. They're movements outside of mainstream subculture. So it's a movement into changing the way that it changes the mainstream, which counterculture does. It also changes how we think, and also is a different form of acceptance. And that can be universal, right? I'd say in Western, mainstream, not Eastern or other parts, but it's just Western I speak of. But I think we are getting to that point where we're just the beginning of it. Like really 2017, I think, was that breaking period for most people within the mainstream right now currently. And now it's only been how many years, right, since that?
Right.
So we probably have another decade or maybe a couple decades. I'm hoping just another decade of this, and more stories coming out and legislation changing, that the average person is starting to wake up and be like, oh, like there is something really going on. I should pay attention. The other part that's doing that and moving that culture shift is, and funny enough, I kind of laugh when I see these, and it's not as frequent as it was, let's say, when David Grush came out, but it's looking at social media and the memes. Like all of us watched all those memes, and they were actually making fun more of the government and people, and how they weren't aware that this was going on, or they didn't care.
It's true. Yes.
Using humor and the satire of that was a way to get people interested in being like, why are all these like alien, government, UFO memes coming out from creators? And I have a good friend of mine that's a big TikToker, called me, and he would like send me pictures of him watching like all these YouTubers that I know, and my show and other things. And I'm like, he's like, oh, I'm in now, Chrissy. Like, I understand why you're doing this. And I was like, welcome. I was like, welcome. Go down. If you need any other, just let me know, and I'll point you in different directions for other reading material or watching material. So that's that point. But he was a creator, and he's like, all of us creators have had these conversations about what's going on and making more content. So I think that that's really interesting. And that shift, we've never seen that shift before. So there will be more of those, right? And also then what's the next kind of little cultural a bump in the road that we're going to find out? Like, do we have more whistleblowers allegedly coming out? What are they going to be saying? Again, what is true? What is not? And then how is that going to affect our internal culture system? It's wild. So
fascinating.
But that's a female perspective. I know a lot of women. That's why we need more women, because not saying men don't do this, but women are really wonderful at being humanitarians and looking at those cultural perspectives and how it affects others. And men do it too. Don't get me wrong. It's not a sexist comment, but women are just nurturing, and that's what we're supposed to be. And so hopefully more women come in and we shift that. So
that's fascinating to me, Chrissy, because you are obviously a student of this, pop culture, alternative culture. When do you see this leading into like a paradigm shift? Because I think I see that coming. Paradigm shifts are so rare, but I think you just see it in all the discussions, not in science in general, right? Not just UFOs, but you just see this paradigm shift coming in, quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and space-time is dead, and all these other things that are happening. How do you see that unraveling from your experience in these, areas?
And can I just jump in too, saying that a lot of people, I think, when David Grush first came out, they anticipated that was going to move the needle significantly. And I'm just curious, I mean, I didn't feel like it did. And so I'm curious on your perspective of what did that really do for the media? Was it just kind of it had its day in the sun and then it was over and people went back to normal? Or do you think that the David Grush revelations really changed, the landscape of UFOs in the media?
Good
Yeah,
question.
it's a great question because I think that the shift has happened for some people. I think it's been individual paradigm shifts right now that we're seeing,
Mhm.
a collective shift. I don't know when that will happen, but I would imagine that there will be these meeting points of science, technology, consciousness, moving into another, we're in the 21st century, moving into another century of science and understanding
Mhm.
that and what that
Mhm.
means. Our evolution of science, under evolution of where we've come from, we keep discovering stuff like that, which is unbelievable, right?
The past.
All the time. So
Yeah.
right. And then we have like maybe we'll be an off-planet species potentially by that time too. And maybe we'll come to a point where we find out that, within Andromeda, in another like galaxy, a sister galaxy potentially, or somewhere else in the cosmos is another form of human or just another type of life. So I think that there will be a meeting of something that will have these cross intersections, and then we'll have probably more of a communal wake up. But we need to first learn how to, obviously, with what's going on right now in the world is horrible. We need to be able to understand and focus on those things and learn how to communicate and how to respect each other first before I think we even get to a point of saying, hey, how are we doing to any form of other being, non-human, or whatever the hell it is. I think we need to be able to
No,
have
that's
that.
such a good
We
point.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. Like
I
we might
know.
not
I
even be
know.
able to do that, and everything does come to a head, and we are not, that is the catalyst moment, is that we've
Right.
not been able to figure out our own issues, but our science and technology is caught up, but our consciousness and understanding of
Consciousness
self and
hasn't.
self-awareness have not. And that's the
Yeah.
head where, there's an explosion of that
Yep.
could be possible too. I hear
Yeah.
so many different theories from experiencers. I still take people, even though it's not from a scientific point of view, I still take, it's a human story. It's an experience for them,
Absolutely.
and things that have happened or things that they've said that have been channeled through them. And those are real stories to them. It matter if it's happened or not. And if it is plausible or not, it's still something to consider to a degree. Right.
Yes.
So
It's
I think that
evidence, if
that's,
nothing
yeah, it's
else.
still relevant, and it's still data, but we need to be able to prove it. And that's what science is finally catching up. Like
Yeah.
we're starting to go that way where we're opening that door so that we can actually look at these things from a scientific point of view. And hopefully the next generations will be doing that. And I really do
Yeah.
think they will be, because they have the ability to talk about it now. And we're seeing little kids. Like I always take pictures of when I see kids have drawings, and I try to post on my Twitter or my Instagram. If I see it out where young kids are having conversations about extraterrestrials, or what does it mean
Yep.
to be human, or what is a UFO, like what's going on, and they're so inquisitive. I've had my friends kids call me to talk about stuff because they're doing projects and they want to learn more. So I
Same.
tell them like where they can research and get resources so they can, learn about it from both perspectives, not just like from one perspective experiencer or just from science. They can look at it all. But I think that that's really
That's
important to
cool.
me, is watching the younger generations learn about it and have the ability to feel that they can express themselves, and having that space where it's not going to be ridiculed. And I think that's really cool. So they'll probably do way more cooler shit than we're doing now. And
Oh,
their
for
podcast
sure.
will be in the metaverse, or like, you'll zoom
my
into a
gosh.
room and everybody will be there. Like it just, it's
Can't even
I'll be
imagine.
80 and I'll be like, this is amazing. Then I'll die. Here we all,
Yeah.
it's like, the best of the best, and then you're like, okay. Or I might not
Yeah.
and just decide to go live on a farm because it's way too much. Who knows?
By that time, you
Right.
won't die. Aging,
Yeah.
aging will be solved by then. So don't
Oh
worry.
God.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I'll be 80
She's
like
like,
back
I'm
in
not
40s.
sure.
So.
That's
Or I'll just be
awesome.
like an avatar at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. The
I think we all
possibilities are
will be.
endless.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have any nudging questions that you want to wrap up with, Ariel? I know you had some really great insights into some of her past.
Well, Yeah, one question that I had for you was, what has your evolution of your UFO journey kind of looked like? Where did you start out and where do you kind of find yourself now as far as theories that you may have considered before, or just researchers that you've gotten into, that kind of thing. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I started off and I'm open-minded now. It doesn't mean that an older theory I wouldn't go back to and be like, "Oh, that's what's happening." When I
Mhm.
was younger, and also this is the case, I'll say this in my learning experience through my father, but then also now working at the Debrief and just like deciding to go like head first into this topic has taught me so much. That's why my theories have changed and evolved because I've learned so much
Mhm.
more than I ever
Yeah.
thought I would in this topic, and that's really cool. And also part of the that's also part of the ontological shock is the
Right.
education around this.
Yeah.
So it started off when I was younger, and I'll say this because of culture feedback loops and what we saw around us in the mainstream is for sure I thought it was extraterrestrial. Doesn't mean it's
Mhm.
not. I don't actually know what
Mhm.
it is, but I started there and it was like, this has
Mhm.
got to be, and I would talk about that with my dad and more of the ET stuff and like, are they
Mhm.
here and visiting and when, would
Mhm.
go down that road. And still, who knows? I still listen to a
Right.
lot of stories or Micah Hanks is wonderful because at times he'll just like send me, data hits of like people doing the reportings, which is like really interesting. So I still not saying that ET is not possible, but I really lean towards more interdimensional. To me, I don't
Mm.
know why it doesn't mean science is proving that, but we look at quantum physics and we look at all different types
Yeah.
of physics and the things that we're learning. There's something that's out there that we just don't understand and can't
Yep.
quantify right now. So
Yep.
to me, having an understanding of it being non-human, as David Grush says,
Mhm.
to me actually makes more sense. It would encompass a lot of different phenomena then, right?
Mhm.
In it from ghosts to you name it that we're not able to prove. So it doesn't mean that this phenomena of the thing that's happening is that it's a UFO. It could be related to all of that. And we're seeing that, right? Leslie Kane says
Yeah.
stuff like that, even Ralph Blumenthal, even the understanding of consciousness is attached to it, life after death, if you talk to Leslie Kane. So all
Yeah.
of that stuff to me screams more interdimensional than it does scream extraterrestrial. But
Yeah.
it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that they're not extraterrestrial too. God, it could
Right.
be it's probably a whole mix of things. So that's where I've been leaning into and learning more about science and educating myself in that realm to be able to understand that when it comes to that tipping point, that I'll be able to at least not know how to do the science, but I'll understand the theories around the science
Right.
and be able to relate it and be able to have maybe less of a shock and be able to explain it to people because my science is up to date or it's caught up to date of
Mm.
those theories. So that's where I've kind of leaned towards. And I'm also really optimistic towards us finding other life. We've heard
Yeah. So
2037
much.
is, yeah, is one of those, could be one of those points that we potentially find life. Who knows? We could find it in the next couple of years too. So at that point, then that opens up a whole new can of worms, right? Of what they are. It could be life just beginning, or it could be life just as intelligent or more. So I think that
Mhm.
we're in a really great space to learn and to understand, but I'm open to always keeping my theories open to what it is, because at the end of it, we might find out that we were like, wow, none of us thought of that because we maybe just don't
Mhm.
have the
Right.
capacity to understand it right now because
Absolutely.
yeah, and we only know what we know. So, I as the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know.
Right.
So,
I
and
think we
that's,
said that
it's
last
Right.
time.
humbling, but it's also makes you want to keep learning too. So,
That's so
Yeah.
fascinating. And my journey has been very similar of, being kind of a sci-fi nerd and thinking about, the extraterrestrial life and what could be out there. I really leaned that way for a while, but now I feel so open-minded and kind of like you said, we might not even have the capacity to understand what this is yet. We may not have the terminology for it. And so, and yeah, science may need to catch up, in a big way for us to even be able to begin to wrap our head around it. So, yeah, I just find myself being very open minded. I love to read, I love to research and just kind of consider the possibilities, but I really don't lean heavily one way or another.
yeah. What about you, Chris?
I think I'm in the same boat. I came in thinking it was nuts and bolts to the topic
Yeah.
and then quickly learned I don't believe it is. So my theories have definitely evolved. I don't think I understand interdimensionalism as much as most people, but I just think it's a phenomenon. I don't think it's just physical and extraterrestrial. I don't. Maybe even my theories also could it be something from ancient, from here on Earth, that we just haven't interacted with. That's something I lean towards as well. But I don't know. It's just so fascinating. Who are your influencers as far as your influencers as far as your readings and your what you like to read about?
Yeah, I've been reading a lot more about J. Allen Hynek. I've read a lot of his stuff recently. I have read Skinwalkers. I'll read papers too, related on, obviously, if I'm interviewing somebody. So sometimes I do try to find papers or academics that are in the space of science and technology, because then it actually, again, makes me understand something. Right, a little bit more and better, because I get to ask. It's a little bit selfish in the podcast. I get asked questions that I might not know, I might be ignorant about, and then, get some education. It's literally, the podcast is like a thesis, really, in its own space for me. And it's a place to learn and to engage and do an art form of communications that I've always wanted to do. But yeah, I read from all different types. I also read stuff that's related to news consistently. Majority of the stuff I read now, outside of books, I don't always read as many books as I should, and I'm trying to do that as much as possible. But it's so hard at time. Right now, I'm actually reading Dr. Master's book right now. That's like a fictional based book, but I'm reading it in support of him. But also, I've the time traveler theory is as a sci-fi chick, Ariel, I'm down with you on that.
Yes.
I'm like, ooh, I gotta read this, because like my sci-fi side is just like, this is fun. And
so
who knows?
cool.
Why can't it? Right. Yeah. Like, why? And also, why can't it be us? Like, Einstein says that, time travel is real. So, or can be done. So why not? So I'm reading stuff like that. But then, I read a lot about the news. That's a lot of it. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to Science World Festival. I watch that on YouTube a lot. Great space for conversations and dialogue, especially with scientists that are smarter than I'll ever be.
Is that the one with the red logo? The red logo?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Oh yeah, I watched those. And that guy, he's phenomenal at interviewing.
Right.
I don't know who he
Wood.
is.
Yeah, he's a wonderful host. Unbelievable.
Oh my
I know.
gosh, goosebumps.
I watch his
really
craft
good.
just to learn. Yeah, I watch his craft to learn. So I'm like, oh, I could be better at this space, or how he asks questions and how he engages, because those conversations are not easy. And how I look at podcasting, because sometimes people are like, I don't have a science background, but I have a arts and humanities background, but I've been interested in science my entire life. And so I read about it, but it doesn't mean that just because you haven't gone to school for it, you can't have a discussion and talk about it. That's why I'm open. My show is Rebelliously Curious, because I'm curious. And so the questions that I might have might be what the average person is like, I don't even know what that is. Right. But I would never compare myself. I watch a lot of Lex Friedman to have better conversations or in-depth conversations, but I'm not a neurologist. I can talk about, let's say, neurology to a degree and have an understanding of it and have a pretty good conversation, but I'm not going to talk about certain facets exactly of neurons in the brain. Like, it's, that's on a different level. And to be honest, people on my side that follow my show wouldn't be watching that anyway, because that's not their expertise. They're looking for somewhere where there's general knowledge, a discussion, and education or understanding that they can follow, and it's communicated towards them. And I'm just the average, they say average Joe. I guess I'm the average Joe, right? It's like,
nah.
No,
well,
you're not.
You know what I mean?
So.
Well, in context of sometimes scientists around me, I'm for sure, I always joke around and be like, I'm the dumbest friend in the room, but I'm okay with that, for the fact that I'm around all these wonderful, smart people that, I get to learn from. Like, if I could be the dumbest person in the room all the time, and I'm okay with that. Doesn't mean I'm dumb. It just means I'm smarter in other areas, but I'm okay being surrounded by
You're
a whole bunch of
surrounding
scientists.
yourself with, Oh, absolutely. I feel the same way. And we talked about this when we approached this podcast, is we're here to be, learn. And it doesn't mean we can't add to an intellectual conversation. We can. but we
Exactly.
want to learn from people who are
Yeah.
in the field. These you guys are
Mhm.
the people that have been here. You've paved the way.
Yep.
We want to keep that knowledge progressing and out to the public, because I think about it and I'm like, 2 years ago I didn't know who Chrissy Newton was. you know there's a lot of people now who don't know who you are, but I want them to know who
Sure.
you are, because you're such an important voice in the community,
Yeah.
and the other people we bring on the
Absolutely.
show I feel the same way about. So learning and surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you is the only way to go.
Yep.
Yeah, and I
So
think there's a space like podcasting is about sharing and learning and together
Mhm.
sometimes, not all the time. It's storytelling. There's a
yeah,
real life human element to it, and that's beautiful.
right,
So people
yeah,
podcast in all different ways, and that's what it's about. It doesn't always have to be one certain way. Television and the way they do news is so done in a certain narrative. Podcasting has
Right.
its own little flair, and I really
it's
love
so
that. And
cool.
it is cool,
Yeah,
and
it's the
it's a
art.
great place to
You can, yeah, sorry, the artistic side of the creative side of people can come into it.
Yep.
yeah, and it gives a place for people to connect and have a place where they can discuss ideas. Like it's such a wonderful medium. And I'm glad I'm in a space where now podcasting is growing, because I wish I
Yeah.
Yep.
started 10 years ago, to be honest. Because I know, but I wasn't ahead of the curve then. Other people were, but I wasn't. But I'm glad I'm still
We
doing it. It doesn't mean you can start whenever you want. You never
Yep.
know what people are going to gravitate towards. I never thought that I would have a little bit of a following that's been growing and doing TV stuff. I never ever thought that, especially with UFOs. Like, I always joke around when friends were like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And I always laugh. I'm like, I just try to do my best. And they're like, "Chrissy, like
That's
like
awesome.
they've known me my whole life." And they'll see me doing TV stuff or other things. And I always laugh about it, because I said, well, I guess it's part of growing and putting yourself out there, right? That's what that is.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
happy to do that and express things I've learned, or uh, be able to be in that space at times. But I laugh
Mhm.
because I always say, out of all the things that I've chose to do in life, I go, it could have been politics. It could have
Mhm.
been, other
yep.
things, maybe in public relations and marketing too. I'm like, why UFOs? Like, it's
I
just,
know.
I always say it's like the
I
weirdest
know.
topic. And they're like, well, why not? But I was like, but no, like,
Yeah.
think about it. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
UFOs. And we
Yeah.
all kind of step back and laugh. And my girlfriends do, because we're all like, I know, it's just so wild of a
It
topic.
is.
And they're
So
like, well, someone's got
wild.
to do it. And I said, yeah, I understand that. But why UFOs? So I said, why didn't
We
I
said
choose
the
politics?
same thing.
Like, I
We
don't
Yeah.
said
know.
the same
I'm very
thing.
grateful and I love it. But I just find it
Yeah.
it's one of those topics that you're like, it's such a
It
wild space to play in. It's the
is
wild,
Mhm.
wild
so
west still
weird.
out there with this topic.
It's
But
the weirdest.
it's
It
fun.
is the wild, wild west, especially on some of the social media. You have to be careful.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
it's
It is
true. Yeah. And like,
crazy.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
why do we gravitate to this topic is something that I always ask to people too, because it's so
Yeah.
interesting to see how their entrance in and why they
I
got in.
never,
And
yeah.
yeah,
I tell people I never would have imagined. It's
Yeah.
like Ariel and I talked about this. I would have done healthcare advocacy. I could have done a million different things, and I always knew I
Mhm.
would use my voice. That's who I am. Whether I
Mhm.
write or whether I want to speak, or but UFOs, never in a million years.
Mhm.
And
yeah,
sometimes I'm just it's just that's why I think the phenomenon is more than nuts and bolts, because I wouldn't be here if it
and it's
weren't
a
for
sport
something.
too, I call it. Like, I don't watch sports. I used to play sports when I was younger, but
It's
to me,
true.
it's my sport. The people are like, why? I said, well, it's like a hobby that's growing, into more of a career for me. But I said, it is like my academic sport. I said, and I
It
love
is.
that.
Mhm.
We even
It is.
commentate on it as a sport. All of us do.
It is.
Yep.
Oh my
Oh
gosh, I
yeah.
love
So
that.
true.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We literally, like, that's why there should be a UFO news network, at least a show
there
weekly that's
really
outside
should.
of a podcast, that you
Yeah.
can commentate on the things that are happening in politics and science and
Oh yeah.
history. Um,
Yeah.
Anthropology, like, it's unbelievable. And then how people are contributing to it, and the ideas, it's a sport. It's literally a
It
commentary. Like,
really
sometimes when I'm
is.
on other people's podcasts and we talk about like the day-to-day breakdowns of like a report, we're literally all commentating like it's a political sport. It's the same thing as
Mhm.
It
politics. We're
really
all just
is.
doing it on a podcast, and with the
It's
average
so
people, right?
true.
Which is great. And we're all sharing
I
our ideas, and we're
I
really
never
into it,
thought
but
of
it's
that. And it
yeah,
reminds
it's a
me,
sport.
like, if you look at like esports, literally,
Yep,
that's what they did. They took
exactly.
the sports industry and they capitalized on that format, right? And now my son goes to all these big gaming, uh conferences and these esports and they commentate on them. It's really what does need to happen in ufology if you think about it.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
and I
also
think
like
I
that's
think all that stuff is on the horizon too. I think that's on the horizon, and to prep for this interview, I watched your interview that you did 2 years ago with Ryan Sprague, and
oh
at
no
one
way.
point at one point during, because you kind of gave your whole background with him, and so it was a good one to watch, and during that interview, you said something like, "Yeah, and maybe someday there'll be a school or a course or a place to go where people can get a degree in ufology," and I think all that stuff is probably on the horizon. The more that this kind of bleeds into the mainstream, I think we're going to see stuff like that continue to crop up.
Oh, I would totally, well, I wouldn't be surprised, but I would totally go to a school that had an area of study of UAP, but then you learn
Mhm.
like science, mathematics, all to
Yeah.
go into that
A
area of study, culture,
multidisciplinary.
theology. Yeah. And then it all goes back to study. But we actually learn like that. That's what Montessori schools are generally for, is learning. Like, for example, you want to learn how to build a spaceship. You go to school, not to say just to learn a spaceship, but in one subject, we're like, okay, in a
Right.
Montessori learning or that type of full thinking learning is we're going to learn how
Mhm.
to build a spaceship. So we're going to teach you everything you need to know in mathematics, science, technology, how to build it, how to work it, how to run it, how to talk
Yep.
about it. And so we teach you based on that one subject. So it would be cool.
Mhm.
Some people might call that a cult, but I don't, outside the cult, some people will be like, yeah, it's what cults do. But it's not. It would be if it's an educational
What
Right.
an
background for you to
educational
be
Yeah.
able to
institution
learn.
does.
Right. And if you
Yeah.
want to go into the study of UFOs and maybe work for the government or work for non for profits, you've been able to go to a place that has taught you how to look at the phenomenon from a
Yep.
full 360-degree
Yes.
view. It would
I
be
Yes.
love
so
that. All
cool.
right, let's
Yeah.
do this. Let's do
Yeah.
this. This sounds like
Oh,
our next to-do list here.
That's on our
yeah.
that's our next project, open a school.
Yeah. Like next headline, 3 women start UFO cult.
Oh gosh.
It's like, oh no. Yeah.
That's
That's
awesome.
funny. So, speaking of that, why do you think that there's so few women in the UFO community? I mean, that was one thing I was really struck by when I joined UFO Twitter was I was looking for other women to connect with and it was hard to come by. And I do feel like it's better off now than it was a few years ago, but it's still, I mean, the ratio is just, very very unbalanced. And I'm just curious if you have any theories as to why that is.
Yeah, I've thought about this a fair amount. Usually I think about this stuff in the shower.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's like I know, or the bath, right? So when I think about it, I usually look back at like the historical aspects. So as being a feminist and understanding that, we didn't have a lot of rights as women. Obviously, we weren't allowed to vote. We weren't even allowed to go to school.
Mhm.
Education was not really a priority. So we didn't
Mhm.
have the ability to go into things like STEM, mathematics, arts,
Mhm.
or mathematics, science. We were told that,
Technology.
we have to stay at home and raise a family and do those things and not be able to
Mhm.
educate or use those abilities of our mind to contribute. We are lucky
Mhm.
that there's pioneers of women that have done that for us in all degrees of industries now, thankfully, and I thank them because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it, right? Is we unfortunately weren't able to contribute meaningfully to all science and have a voice. So
Mhm.
if we look at it historically, and again, this is not a sexist comment. So any man listening, it's just historically accurate. Men were in those spaces, and
Yep.
men, and I say this too. It's a very white rich man sport.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It still is
Yeah.
actually.
Still is. Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
we've now thankfully have been able to, because of the internet and be able to share, is that the average person can have a say in all different degrees. So I think that that's an aspect of it, is that women weren't allowed to be educated. So those contributions to those areas were very less. And that's where it was very heavy in, especially within the military complex we see in the early 40s and the 50s.
Yeah.
That was all run by men. You saw no women having any conversation. You know, the occasional female ufologist would pop up, but not many of them. So that's one reason why an industrial complex, military complex, lack of education for women, and having the ability to have a voice. So now that's changed. Now we're seeing, the average person can come in and be able to think about it, talk about it, become participate in it, and have really great ideas and share them. So I think that's why. And now we're seeing more women come in because they're realizing that there's more women here. There's women that are contributing in the science side, which is like wonderful to see. And I love talking to them, even on the theology side of things. You know, we look at Diana Pasoka for sure. Love her and everything she's doing. And for sure in the area of ufology, she's one of those amazing women that will go down of educating people, at least on theology. And I think she's one of the best people to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's why, but that will change. And also I think it's still seen very much as a male dominated industry, which it is.
Right.
But women are coming in. We're seeing political women come in. Doesn't mean I always agree with all of their politics, I'll say, but they are coming in, and I'm thankful that they're at least having a voice and championing that in the topic. So, you know, I think it's just a slow start. And also, again, you know, where we were able to bring the humanity into this. I think more women will come in. And when we start to maybe get closer to what it is, and we have to learn about us and who this are, and have people come together to have understanding. Women are wonderful communicators, and we're nurturing. And I think that that's a place where naturally women will step in to create community. And we're seeing it. You guys are doing it. We're all doing it. And that's the beginning of it. And also showing that women can have these discussions and sit at those tables. And, you know, even if they're challenging or not, we can still be there and we can learn and we can contribute meaningfully.
No, I love that. And I think it's, I wonder how effective, quote unquote, disclosure will be without women at the at the table. You know, it's going to be very difficult without women, you know, in families, in homes, you know, in the community, having these conversations. It's just, they need us. They need women to be talking about this if they want to help disclose the what's going on.
Yeah, but look at Gillibrand. Like, she's a woman, and if it wasn't for her, she championed legislation. Like, well done.
Yeah.
Like, I think about her a lot, to be honest, because I'm like, you're going down in history as one of those women that pushed this into legislation. If it wasn't for you, you know, and a lot of the other senators too, but you are one of them that spoke up.
Champion.
And and that's unbelievable. And that came from a woman, you know. So
you're right.
I think that, and we still see men, like, you know, I think that there are forms of misogyny in everything that happens in the businesses, and we still see it in the UFO space, but that's sometimes of individual based misogyny, not so much as collective misogyny. And so I think we have less collective misogyny now because women are respected and they contribute, and science sees that. And we're saying, hey, no, everyone's in the Western cultures. A lot of people agree that women need to have a voice and they contribute meaningfully.
Right.
So that's shifting, but yeah, you still get the occasional, you know, misogynist comment or whatnot, but that's never going to end. It's just how we deal with it. But women are really making wonderful strides. So we'll see. Yeah.
You've seen a lot.
I love that. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks.
Oh, sure.
So I think we're close to the end here. I just want to ask one last question, if you don't mind. If you had to talk about what you think the elephant in the room is, with ufology or whatever topic we've been talking about today, what would you say that is?
Oh, that's a great question. Ooh.
Sorry,
I
should
don't
have prepped
know.
you.
I'm like, that's a great question. I'm like, well, I know there's so many of them. You know, I guess the elephant in the room is, you know, I guess if we found out what they know, I don't know. Honestly, I've never really thought about that, of what the elephant in the room is, because I think there's a few of them. I think there's a couple pink ones walking around, you know, that we're all like, yep.
Yeah, there's a few. Yeah, no, that's
right.
Okay.
There's a
That's
few
great.
Pink ones with yellow polka dots.
Right, exactly.
Staring at us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the big one is knowing that I would say the biggest one in the elephant in the room is knowing that the government does know more and has classified data that needs to be released, and they're
Yeah.
not releasing it, and we don't know
Yeah.
why. So that's, I
Yeah.
think, the right now the current elephant in the
Yeah.
room, being like, what
Yeah.
is this data? What do you have? Tell us. And people are going to champion that. So I
Yeah.
think that right now currently is
Yep.
outside of like the elephants in the room could be like, there's an ET elephant, there's an extraterrestrial, sorry, there's a dimensional elephant, there's
Mhm.
the disinformation elephant. So there's a few
Mhm.
of them
Yeah.
roaming around. But I think that's the big one that we all kind of look
That
at and
is.
say like, all right,
You
we're
know
calling you out
something and you're
first.
not.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and
It's
I
time to
and I
hold you
said this
accountable.
recently in a Q&A I did for the SCU, Scientific Coalition of
Oh.
UAP Studies. I said to them, because they asked kind of like a similar question too. And I said that that's something that we do need to focus on collectively, and we need to be able to have elected officials be able to push that forward. And the
Mhm.
irony of it all is that we rag on elected officials because we're like, you're lying to us, you're lying to us, you're lying to us, you're always lying to us. But then on the other
Mhm.
end, they're
And
like,
we
no, no,
expect
no,
them
we're
to do it.
championing, we're doing the best we can, we're doing the best they can. So people,
Mhm.
maybe not the ones that are actually lying to us, but the ones that we might think that might not be transparent or might be doing the heavy lifting in the back end,
Yeah.
or just elected officials doing the really heavy lifting in the back end. And because of them, that through politics that people don't always trust, we actually get an answer. And that's ironic, right?
Mhm.
It's people in
It's
the
so
government
true.
fighting with the government. So right now, that's why I kind of step back. I don't really rag on, Sean Kirkpatrick. I don't really rag on any
Mm.
elected official. I don't agree with some of their political stances. I'll say
Of
Mhm.
for
course.
sure, as a female
Yes.
and a feminist, oh, I do not align with a lot of theirs. But
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
can distinguish between my understanding of a topic of UFOs
Right.
that's a bipartisan topic outside of what I feel
Yeah.
and how I operate in this space, right? Those are different
Mm.
challenges that we're all going to have to face at different times, but I can separate them. I've had
And I
conversations with people that
appreciate
have been,
that.
yeah,
No, sorry. I
I
appreciate the
don't
way you've
align.
structured that, and
Yeah, I don't
it
align with
gives
certain
an
politicians like
example.
Tim Burchett. Like, I don't really
Right.
align with his other political theories, but I had a great conversation with him and he was wonderful. He was respectful to
Mhm.
me. He was great,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and that's what that was about. But again, I wasn't going to go into school shootings or other forms
Right.
of politics because
Right.
Yes.
again, that's not my show. Maybe on another show, but that's not my show. And my
Exactly.
audience isn't listening to have me talk about those issues. And as a
Right.
Canadian, is it really my space to be able to talk about that?
Mm,
From,
good point.
as
Yeah.
right. Is that fair?
I think
I
it
don't know if
is.
that's
I'm sorry. I think it is. I just think it's again, it's a
well, I
human.
appreciate that.
These are
Yeah.
human topics.
Yeah.
So
They are very much human
yeah.
topics. And, from an outsider, I spend a lot of time in the States. I have a lot of American friends from all around the world. It's you see them and you see how things are influencing them and you care. So you obviously want to have a say so it doesn't affect us. And to be honest, whatever happens in Canada and whatever happens in the States, it affects each other because
Right.
Of
we're so close.
course.
We're all Americans when it comes to it in
Yeah.
the continent of North
Too
America.
close.
That's
Yep.
what we
Yep.
are, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so we all think similarly to a degree. It's just how we go about it is sometimes different from our cultural perspectives. But yeah, and so again, like I can talk to Tim and have that conversation. Again, I don't even always agree with all of his UFO related stuff, but we can have those
Right.
discussions. And I think
Mhm.
that's what that's about, right? Sometimes you do have to compartmentalize based on the area of research that you want to do and try to
Mhm.
push something through to be, again, I keep saying the word meaningful, but to be meaningful.
Mhm.
No, I think that's really a valuable lesson for me because one of the things I've always struggled with is not compartmentalizing. Like I'm very black and white.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the lessons I've been learning over the last couple of years. When you go into ontological shock and you realize that the world's not black and white,
Mhm.
um, but really being able to appreciate that ability to compartmentalize or to have discussions and dialogue with people of
Mhm.
differing beliefs and differing backgrounds and different perspectives is such a valuable gift to society that we need more of that,
Yeah.
and the ability to have those conversations so that you're not always pushing hot buttons just to push them. I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of times we were there where people were just wanted to have fights,
Mhm.
but it's not necessary. We can have these dialogues and be adults and
Mhm.
disagree. I.
Yeah, it's so funny because I used to always get when I would talk about stuff about it becoming more political, people were like, "Chrissy, it's bipartisan. You're making it political." And I'm like, "No, no, I'm asking the questions about if it's political because that's a worry of mine." I say, so I
Right.
try to call it out more than anything because I do see it sometimes going one way, political or the other, and that's just
Right.
experience because of my job. Doesn't mean I'm right, and again, hope I'm
Yeah.
wrong. So but sometimes that's the course of what humans do. We end up taking something and media or politics polarizes it.
Yeah.
It's not always the
Absolutely.
people. So those are things that, yeah, like I get ragged on stuff like that sometimes, but I try to do things in good nature and try to have a balanced conversation, but doesn't mean my bias doesn't slip into sometimes that I have to be mindful of because I'm human too. We all have it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and when people call
True.
you out on stuff like that, which I think is really great on YouTube and on Twitter,
Yes.
when they go about it constructively and they're not like attacking me, they're just maybe attacking my argument or something, then I'm open to listen because I think that's the best part about it is where I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I guess I never saw it that way. Or maybe I did come off like that and I should maybe check myself
Absolutely.
because like it
No,
doesn't,
I
it's just the way it is. It makes me a better podcaster. Yeah.
no, I
Mhm.
appreciate that. And Ariel and I talked about that because I said, there's always some grain of truth. Not always, but for the most part, there's a grain of truth in what people say in their criticisms, and
Mhm.
Yep.
it's really important to hear it and not personalize it, which
Mm.
I can do because I'm a very sensitive person. As much as I'm direct, I'm very sensitive. So I
True.
told her I just gotta let it, take the meat and get rid of the bones, and
Mhm.
appreciate what people say so you can learn from it. That's just what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's harder with others, like some and you know what I mean? Sometimes it's easier
Oh,
with
for
some people and
sure.
harder with others. It's
Very
so funny
true.
how people like hit our soft buttons and they're able to
Oh
like
yeah,
just get right in there and you're like, "How did you
right
Yeah.
do
there.
that?" Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an art in that its own way, not a good one, but some people do that.
No.
You can be have I've had conversations with I'm a very passionate person, so I can have a conversation with somebody for sure that can be on a level, but then the next person just knows how to hit that button, and you're like,
It's
"Ah."
Mhm.
true. And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you're reacting and it's like, what
Oh,
is this
yeah, and then
about?
in a place that
Yeah.
you're generally not reacting as. So, we see obviously, I see that on UFO Twitter all the time. I'm
Oh
like,
my God.
I see each other, like, go in and, like, just start poking, and I'm like, "Stop
Oh
poking the bear,
yeah.
guys." I'm like, "Everyone's gonna kill each
Yeah.
other on here at some point in time." And
I
I even see with
know.
friends of mine that know each other that do it to each other. And I'm like, "Guys,"
Yeah.
I'm like, "We can't start doing that because 'cause we're just hitting soft
Yeah.
spots at this point. It's not even constructive," you know?
It's not
Yep.
constructive at a certain point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of it's just too much. I hope that it continues to evolve as a community and there's less of that, and more positive, just more activism. That's what I'm seeing. The other thing I've noticed on UFO Twitter is, especially in the recent months, more activism to get
For sure.
involved and call your
Mhm.
representatives and things like that.
Mhm.
So that's been really cool, as opposed to just some of the negative stuff that was going on.
No, I
Yeah.
know.
So,
And also, like, people meeting up, I always think that's really great too. People share I follow along too at times.
yeah,
I get to see people like I met you, Chris and Ariel. Hopefully I can meet you at some
yeah,
point too.
Mhm.
Like it is nice to meet
so
people. And as
great.
much as people are like, oh, it's like that's the community. It's like, no, I'm not going and meeting all of UFO Twitter. I said I'm meeting people that, have like-mindedness,
Yeah,
and enjoy. And there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with that. I hate when
No.
people try to say that when people like something or they get along, that people try to make that into like a negative at times where it's like,
really,
Mhm.
no, sometimes people
yeah,
do. Yeah. They're just like, oh, it's just, that's just a
yeah.
UFO Twitter comment and you're just part of the UFO
Oh,
Twitter thing. It's like, no, and so what if I am? Like, who cares?
Mhm.
Like, mind your
Yeah.
own
yeah,
business. Like, it doesn't
Yes.
affect you if you're still
Yep.
reporting and doing things that are
yeah,
unbiased and well, then it shouldn't matter. So,
No.
yeah.
I don't really care what people say. I would say I contribute as much as I can to a group of people that are in a counterculture, which like and want to be able to express this and have great conversations. And that's what I care about. I don't agree with
I
everything
love
that
it.
happens in that space. And I don't even fight in there, but I think it's wonderful that we're right. Like, I think it's wonderful that we just have the ability to be able to connect with people that are like-minded and have fun, and that's
Mhm.
it and
Yeah.
have great discussions. And there's nothing wrong with that at all.
No, I think it's been great, and it's honestly what drew me into the community. It became my safe space because it was the first place I found people that experienced things that I was experiencing. So,
Mhm.
you come to kind of trust in that, and then when you see the community kind of go awry, you're kind of like, oh. I'm a student of culture, so it's very fascinating to me to watch the dynamics of this quote unquote organization, of UFO Twitter taking place. So,
It's
Yeah, it
um,
happens
because
in every
it's
group.
really because I think that humanity in general has outrage addiction, and we always just want something to be outraged about. We want
ooh,
something, to be offended over. And I just think that that plays into UFO Twitter all the time. It's like, can we just not for just 2 seconds? Can we just not have it be, something to be outraged about,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, and every community has that. Doesn't matter, it's a science
Yeah.
community, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's the celebrity culture, like everyone has
Yep.
it. And
Yep.
so
Hmm.
it's just
That's a good
it's
one.
always gonna be like that. It's always gonna be a mechanism of it until like
Yep.
this is accepted into the greater mainstream, and then
Right.
everybody's having discussions about this consistently, or it's in the public school education system, or it's something like that. Then
Yep.
everybody will be
Yeah.
greatly outraged together, So
Yes.
like it's like it's how it works, So
Yeah,
it's
that's true. We got
it,
to outrage everyone else before they realize
yeah,
there's something to be outraged about.
right. Everyone
Yep.
collectively will be outraged. So it's just,
Yep.
you're never going to
Yeah.
get away from that. But I think
Yeah.
it's just a space where people can be able to express themselves and feel safe, have a safe space, and then also be able to learn and
Yep.
be able to
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
inform new ideas. I think it's really great.
It's been
That's it.
great.
And I think that's what those spaces are there for. And also, I've never seen any other online community like UFO Twitter. It's just wild. Yeah, I even
Yeah.
my friend, she was just like, what the hell, Chrissy?" I was like, "Trust me, it's its own living beast out there."
It
Yes,
is.
it
It
is.
really is its own
Yep.
living beast for sure. Well,
That's so
thank you
funny.
so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I know that your time is valuable. You're super busy, as we've all learned. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for taking the time to be with us today and share your story.
Thank you,
Yeah,
ladies.
seriously, it has been such an honor to meet you and to talk with you and to just pick your brain. I mean, this is what I've been dreaming of is just finding these like-minded individuals to just sit down and have a fun conversation with and pick each other's brain and learn from each other. So, yes, thank you so much for coming on. It's been so much fun talking to you.
Thanks.
And
Thanks,
the
you
last thing
ladies.
I'll ask is tell people where they can find you, and we'll put it up on the screen afterwards if we can get our technology sorted out. We're newbies here, so
Yeah.
No, it's okay. They can go to on Instagram, it's being Chrissy Newton. On Twitter, it's just Chrissy Newton. And then they can follow my work at the debrief.org. And then my podcast is on all Spotify. It's on YouTube and all like Spotify and Apple podcast platforms. Rebelliously Curious with Chrissy Newton. But if they put in Rebelliously Curious, they'll see it pop up. So that's it. That's where you
awesome.
can find me.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Bye,
Thanks,
so
ladies.
much,
guys.
Good to
Chrissy.
see you. Bye.